It happened on a rainy evening in Tokyo, in one of those restaurants suspended high above the city, where the windows stretch from the floor to the ceiling, and the world below looks like an ocean of light. Inside, everything gleamed. The glassware, the polished wood, the silver forks that reflected the soft glow of lanterns. The air carried the quiet rhythm of jazz, a soundtrack of sophistication masking the arrogance that floated among the tables. At one corner, a group of men laughed too loudly, their confidence fueled by money and wine. Among them sat a man whose watch alone could buy someone's home, a billionaire investor visiting Japan to finalize a massive deal. He was used to being admired, obeyed, and feared. Respect for him was something you could buy with a tip. The waitress who served his table was a young woman named Aiko. She moved with grace, balancing plates with precision, her bow deep, her tone polite. Her uniform was immaculate, her smile soft but distant, the kind that hides exhaustion. She had been working double shifts for months, trying to cover her mother's hospital bills. She didn't have the luxury to rest, to complain, or to fail. To the billionaire, she was invisible, another part of the service he had paid for. He leaned back in his chair, his expensive cologne filling the air. "You know what's funny?" he said to the man beside him. "No matter where I go, it's always the same. Waitresses smile, they bow, and they pretend to care. But take away the uniform, and they're all the same, desperate for tips." His voice carried across the table, loud enough for others to hear. Some of his colleagues laughed. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Aiko approached to refill his drink. He glanced at her name tag, rolling the name on his tongue. Aiko. Pretty name. What does it mean again? Little love? Or little servant? The men chuckled, and Aiko bowed slightly, not reacting, but the billionaire wasn't done. He switched to Japanese, whispering to his translator with a smirk. "Kanojo wa kirei dakedo, atama ga warusudana." The translator froze, forcing a polite smile. Aiko's hand trembled for a second as she poured the sake. She heard every word. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. Years of practice had taught her that silence could be armor. Yet something inside her shifted. A quiet defiance that she hadn't felt in a long time. He mistook her composure for ignorance. "See," he said in English, "even when you insult them, they just smile. That's good service." He laughed, proud of his cruelty. When Aiko walked away, she could feel her pulse echoing in her ears. Every time someone had belittled her, every rude gesture, every whisper, it all came back. But tonight, the rain outside seemed to whisper too, tapping against the glass as if reminding her, even storms begin quietly. Minutes passed. The billionaire's table grew louder. He bragged about his wealth, his deals, the empires he had built. But beneath all that arrogance was an emptiness that no one dared to mention. The thunder outside rolled closer, merging with his laughter. When Aiko returned with their food, she placed each dish carefully, her hands steady, her gaze lowered. The billionaire leaned toward his translator again, speaking louder than before. "Kono ryorio mote kita onanoko, marude meido mitai dana." The laughter that followed was sharp, slicing through the air. Aiko froze. For a brief moment, the room seemed smaller, the walls pressing closer. She looked up, slowly, deliberately, and met his eyes. The laughter faltered. Her voice was calm, yet every word carried the weight of centuries of dignity. "Oken ga anata, o irakushita wake ja arimasen, hito o sonke dekiru kokoro koso ga shin no tomi desu." Her tone was not angry. It was steady, precise, beautiful, like a blade wrapped in silk. The entire restaurant went silent. Even the jazz stopped mid-note. Every pair of eyes turned toward her. The billionaire's smirk vanished. His hand, still holding the glass, trembled slightly before he set it down. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. The words she had spoken hit harder than any insult. He looked around, searching for someone to laugh, to break the tension, but no one did. His translator lowered his head. His colleagues stared at their plates. The air itself felt heavy, as if the city outside was holding its breath. Aiko bowed gently and walked away, her steps slow and graceful. There was no triumph in her face, only peace. She had spoken not to humiliate him, but to free herself from silence. The billionaire sat there, frozen. The arrogance that had defined him for years began to dissolve. He thought about her words, and they echoed in his mind like an echo he couldn't silence. He remembered being young, washing cars, struggling to pay rent, promising himself he'd never feel powerless again. Somewhere along the way, he had mistaken wealth for worth. When she returned with the check, he stood up. His guests watched in disbelief as he placed his hands before him and bowed deeply. The room fell silent again. It was not a gesture of pride, but surrender. "Arigato," he said quietly, "for teaching me something my money never could." Aiko's eyes softened. She nodded politely and turned away, disappearing into the soft glow of the restaurant lights. For a long time, no one spoke. Then one of the men at the table whispered, "Did he just bow to a waitress?" The translator replied, "Yes, because for once, he met someone richer than himself." That night, as the city lights flickered below, the billionaire sat alone in his hotel room. He replayed her words again and again. He looked at his reflection in the window, the man who once thought he could buy everything. And for the first time, he didn't like what he saw. The next morning, the restaurant received a letter. It was handwritten, neat, and simple. To Aiko, "Yesterday you reminded me that respect is a language every heart understands. I came to Tokyo to make deals, but instead I found wisdom. Thank you." Inside the envelope was a donation for the restaurant's staff, not as a tip, but as gratitude. At the bottom of the note he wrote, "To those who serve with grace, you are the true face of strength." Weeks later, Aiko received another letter, this time from his company. It wasn't a formality or apology. It was an invitation. They wanted her to work as an interpreter for an upcoming international conference, not as a waitress, as a professional. She hesitated for a moment before accepting. When the day arrived, she walked through the grand hall where executives gathered in tailored suits. At the center of the crowd stood the billionaire. When their eyes met, his expression was humble. He smiled, bowed slightly, and spoke softly, "Anata kara manabimashita, arigato." If this story touched your heart, Aiko bowed back, her smile calm and genuine. The moment passed without applause or spectacle, but something within both of them had changed forever. The narrator's voice echoes softly now. Sometimes the greatest lessons don't come from teachers or books. They come from strangers, from moments when life decides to turn pride into humility. Respect doesn't need translation. Kindness doesn't need wealth. And the language of the heart, once spoken, can transform even the coldest soul. But stay with us. Every week, we share stories where compassion, courage, and destiny intertwine, reminding us that the smallest act of respect can echo louder than a lifetime of power.